Babayka by Aniduo. I've never dreamed of being a simple worker. I have creative interests and I'd like the same career, but I didn't have any opportunities to get a good education. Our city is just industrial, transport and motor. People don't draw or write here, they produce. Born with the soul of a creator, I feel sorry for you. There's no need for this. In this city, you need to work with your hands, not with your head. Leave this place? I didn't have the money for this. I'm not from those families, and don't say that it doesn't matter. For those who have no money, there's only one prospect: to go to a local technical school and then to a factory. Bear the burden and live like others. You are not better than others. School, technical school, factory, wedding, children, and will go the same way as me. No, it's not for me. After school, I went to a local technical school and studied as a lathe operator. But I've decided that I will work and save money. No marriage and no children until I get a good education and leave this city where factory chimneys cover the sky with smoke. I wanted me and my future children to have a choice. May I have to make much more effort than those who were lucky enough to be born in the right place and in the right family. It's all about age. When you're young and strong, you are eager for new opportunities and great deeds, but life will put everything in their place. Tomorrow you can fall in love with a girl from the neighboring house, have a child, and you can have a wedding. This way, all the money will go away there and you will no longer be up for great deeds. We are all like this here. Work, home and TV. Why dream in vain about something that will never be? That's what my colleagues say. I was the youngest worker in the repair department. Men from 40 years old worked there, and I was a 20-year-old boy. We were from different generations, but not to say I had no one to talk to here. Among the locksmiths there were also very smart, well-read people. You could talk to them about anything. On the one hand, it's great when there is someone to talk to at work. On the other hand, it seems that all these intellectuals have no place in the repair department, but they remained humble workers who work for a humble wage. I didn't want to see my future in them. I was the only lathe operator for the entire department. Our factory was outside the city. We repaired trucks. I didn't have to do anything difficult. I was just sharpening what needed to be sharpened. The work was dull. The workshop was gloomy and damp. It was noisy and smelled of oil, diesel, fuel, and gasoline. The hands were always dirty, burnt from metal shavings, and the nails were black. Although the conditions were harsh, they were not terrible. Everything was bearable until the real horrors began at our factory. One day, 3 employees fell ill at once. At the morning meeting, I noticed that something was wrong with them. They were pale like ghosts, and their eyes were cloudy. One of them often coughed and beat his chest with his palm. During the day, I work at the lathe in the separate room. I spent most of my working time alone. Only sometimes they came to pick up extra and finish parts, then give me tasks. We met with local colleagues at smoke breaks and during lunch breaks, so the locksmiths were barely alive at dinner. And during the smoke break, all three of them were coughing. They were asked to sit away from others. One employee coughed so hard that he barely stopped, and then spat on the floor. His saliva was black. Another sick person saw this and also spat. His saliva was also black. Have you all swallowed fuel oil? Aide the head of the local department named Dimitri. He is currently 59 years old. He has exactly 1 year left before retirement. A calm and experienced man who has gained enough life experience over his years working in extreme conditions, such as the police and the fire station. During his life, he saw many terrible things and more than once saved the lives of others. A good man with a big heart. No, boss, it's not fuel oil. It is something more like blood. Blood? Ivan, go to the hospital tomorrow and get checked out. We don't need some kind of illness here at the factory. I'm sorry, boss. I didn't do it on purpose. It's something from the very morning. I felt bad since I went to work. My lungs hurt too much. The lungs, you say? It's better to not mess with this. Go check it out and take step on. I don't like how you look. You can go home now. The guys will help you until the end of the work shift. Thanks, Chief. Ivan turned to Stepan and flashed a glance at the exit. After that, they packed up and left. Damn. Again, we have to take the rap for these two. They always have some kind of problem. Be quiet. What an outbreak. Get back to work. After a few minutes of indignation from the workers, they returned to work. The next day, only one of the three workers who had been sick was at the morning meeting. I didn't know his name. It was an elderly man whom everyone called Vitalik. That morning he looked really bad. He never missed work in his life, did not take vacations, and endured all sorts of illnesses on his feet. And therefore he came, but by the middle of the working day, he fell face down on the concrete floor. The disease still knocked him off his feet. Vitaly crooked on the floor and did not stop coughing. He was taken away in an ambulance, and everyone hoped that everything would be fine with him, as with the rest of the guys. The men got sick. It can't be helped. If the hard workers get sick, it's always hard. However, all as one recovered and got back to work, but not this time. At the morning meeting, our boss got up from his chair, took off his cap and pressed it to his chest as he began to tell us the sad news. Vitaly and the three other locksmiths died. Everyone gasps and looked at the boss terrified. No way. What did they die from? Do we have some kind of virus here? Or an epidemic? Don't panic. This is not a virus or an epidemic. This is something strange, because 3 of them turned out to have problems with their lungs. It seemed as if they inhaled the black, muck-like mold. There's no mold in our department. Where could it possibly come from? Maybe they met after work, sat somewhere and got poisoned by something. Still, there will be a sanitary inspection here at the weekend. All of you must pass the medical examination on Saturday. Check your lungs and be attentive to your health. This news shocked me to the core. 3 employees died on the same day, and how not to panic in such a situation? Although I was in a separate room, I began to work in a respirator, and many others also armed themselves with masks. I immediately remembered the first months of the pandemic. Only at dinner, everyone opened their faces again. We sat away from each other, and several workers were coughing, but it was a common thing. There was always someone coughing. The main thing is that no one had black saliva. Usually at lunchtime, the hard workers were talking actively, but not today. Without those three, the tables look empty. I know what happened to him. It's all stirred. Suddenly, the handyman Fimic. It was a 40-year-old man who had been beaten by life a lot, from which he immediately took to alcohol. In the distant past, he lost his wife and son in a car accident and did not recover for a long time. If it were not for his friends and acquaintances who helped him get back on his feet. After that, he became interested in various oddities, occult things. Everyone considered him strange and slightly crazy. Someone talking nonsense. Show some respect for the dead. Listen to me. Fimic got carried away. I saw it when we were on the bus after work. It was last week. I saw it through the windows in the woods. Such a creepy bastard. You know, the head and the body are human, but only in shape. And instead of arms and legs, there are some drop-shaped paws, like insects. All gray and shells like a beetle. I didn't even tell you. I knew that you would laugh at me. I right away realized that this was not good. I knew that something would happen soon. We often made fun of Fimic, but these stories annoyed us. They were out of place in the context of a sudden death of 3 people. Fima was a strange person. He was always interested in pseudo-scientific programs about psychics. He believed in aliens and UFOs. In addition, he was fond of the bottle. He never drank at work, but in the mornings, he always reeked of alcohol. So, you were on a bus and in the dark, in a second, you saw and described in such detail some kind of mutant. Did you start celebrating at the end of your work shift right on the bus? I quickly finished my lunch and went to my workroom. I didn't want to talk. I didn't feel right. The day before yesterday, the men walked around alive, but today they were gone, and no one knows what happened to them. It's creepy. From time to time, I spit in my palms and looked to see if my saliva turned black, listened to my feelings, whether it was easy for me to breathe and whether my throat was tearing. Everything seemed to be right, and suddenly it felt as if the ground beneath me trembled, and the high shadow swept over my walls. I froze in fear. In the rooms where the machines stood there were large windows up to the ceilings, but it was impossible to see anything behind them because all the windows were covered in matte film. What was that? It looked like a massive figure. I immediately remembered Fima's story. I'm starting to believe in this monster. That's the last thing I need. I wasn't in the mood to work at all. I waited for the end of the shift, and when the working hours finally ended, I was first to go outside and wait for the bus that took us from work to the city. It was supposed to be here any minute. The territory of our factory was illuminated by two bright lanterns. I was looking at the auto barrier waiting for the bus to appear. It suddenly seemed to me that I saw a thick black cloud that was drifting by the ground along the fence. It floated like fog. I quickly pulled a scarf over my face and ran back into the building because I wanted to show my colleagues what I saw. But while I was calling them, the black cloud had already disappeared. I told them everything without fear of making a fool of myself. I was sure that our colleagues became infected and died exactly because of something like this, and I don't want us to get sick. They said that it was most likely my imagination. We got on the bus and drove off. On the way, one of our workers coughed suspiciously. He intentionally sat down at the back of the bus to avoid sidelong glances. I turned to the window and tried not to think about anything, but thoughts about dead colleagues, about strange shadows outside the shop windows, and about the black cloud that I saw on the territory came into my head. Too much in one day. From the workshop to the city, go about 20 minutes on an unlit road. There was forest all around. When we drove past the old cemetery, just for a moment, it seemed to me that something on long and high legs was wandering among the trees and graves. This scene almost didn't get any reaction from me. I thought that all this is a projection of an overloaded consciousness. I saw what I thought about. It could be trunks, intertwined tree branches, blinks of light on the glass. Images were drawn in my head, inspired by the stories of one of our workers, Fima, about the monster, and my eyes clung to similar figures. I didn't do much on the weekends. I just missed the whole Saturday and Sunday and did not rest at all. On Monday morning, I barely got up to go to the morning bus, and it seemed that the whole body resisted going to work. I almost missed the bus. Eugene was not there. It was a bad idea to go to inspect the place where he sat on Friday evening. I only spoiled my mood from the very morning. In the back seats, the entire floor was covered in dark blotches, and another worker fell ill. It didn't bode well. Why in the world did I drive to work that morning? I should have gone straight to the central office for dismission and dealt with everything. There were only 5 workers at the morning meeting, including me and the head of the department. The men revolted. They were saying that more than half of the workers were gone and there was an epidemic. I supported them. Boss literally begged us and said that there would be an investigation and he would find out what had happened. But last weekend, a special service had already done all the work in the department. They processed everything, cleaned it, and recognized that the premises as completely safe for work. Guys, don't you see? There's no one to work. Without you, all production will stop. The boss asked us. He convinced us in the end. We have already arrived at work, so be it. We will finish our shift. The trucks were waiting for repair after the weekend in the department. Everything in there was shiny and smelled of chlorine. This place has never been so clean before. But I worked in the respirator, and at dinner, everyone was silent. I was eating what I brought with me in silence, sitting away from others. Suddenly, the storekeeper Stefan as if unable to bear it, shouted, I, s- I saw it too. Everyone looked at him, but no one asked anything, as if everyone already knew what it was all about. Even Handyman Fima didn't say anything, and the locksmith Michael, who liked to argue, also kept silent. Now there was a strict atmosphere in the department. You could only hear clanging of instruments, and the roar of engines, and conversations were only about work. Before the end of the shift, the boss got into his car and drove away for work. He can do it. He is the boss after all. You can say the same about workers though. After finishing the last hour of work, we got into the bus. There were 6 of us, including the driver. I thought only about getting home as soon as possible. Previously, I somehow endured this factory, but now I want to run away from here. We drove down a dark, empty road. I didn't look out the window. What if I see something terrible there? What is that thing? The driver shouted at the whole bus and slammed on the brakes. I hit my chest against the seat, and the other workers flew out of their seats. The bus almost turned upside down. We stopped and I saw something huge break through the windshield. It pierced our driver. Blood flooded out as he breathed a last sigh and fell on his side. The giant paw disappeared into the darkness. Other workers stood up from the floor. We were all inside the bus in the middle of the road. The windshield was shattered and the driver was dead, his blood spreading throughout the cabin. What happened? They asked me because I was sitting in the front. Others also looked at me questioningly. It seemed that I was the only one who saw the giant paw and heard a familiar stomp from the street and these steps on the asphalt. Don't go outside. There's something creepy. Everyone, be quiet. What else could I say? We all shifted to the center of the bus and tried to stay away from the windows. We pricked up our ears and looked at each other. So, what are we waiting for? Let's call for help. Michael said, "This is a 53-year-old unremarkable man. He is married and has 2 children. He is kind and responsive, always ready to help and give advice. Almost all my colleagues at work turn to him. To sum up, he's an exemplary family man and a good worker." I took out my phone and called for help. And what should I say? That we saw a terrible shaggy monster? They won't believe us. Calm down. Say that the bus was attacked and the driver is dead. I think they'll believe it. Did you see who exactly attacked it? If I only knew what it is. But it didn't take me long. It didn't take me a long time to explain. This thing was looking at us through the right window, and everyone saw it. Its head was like a leather-covered skull. It was looking at us with its empty eye pits. Perhaps this thing was once a human, but it's not anymore. It looked like a dead human body that had grown legs, that had grown long knee-shaped limbs instead of arms and legs. It moved on them like a 4-legged animal. The creature was so tall that it had to bend down to look into our windows. Everyone on the bus began to panic. The men raised their voices. I yelled too. I felt like a child again and wanted to hide behind the adults. Only Michael did not lose his composure and was calling someone and telling them about the attack on the bus. It was walking around, showing its dead face from one window to another. We were like bugs in a matchbox for him. Handyman Fima was freaking out. He didn't want to stay inside the bus. The enclosed space drove him into a panic. He felt trapped. The man was held by others, but he escaped. When this thing was behind the bus, Fima ran out somewhere towards the forest. Fast Paws immediately rushed after him, and we heard a loud scream. There were 4 of us left. We stood on our backs pressed against each other. We all understood that we couldn't go outside, but it wasn't safe inside either. That freak at any second could break through the windows with a sharp paw and string like a barbecue. I looked out the broken window, waiting for sirens to flicker there. It was completely dark outside, as if the headlights went out, and suddenly I realized what it was. The bus was surrounded by a cloud of black pollen. It gradually leaked into the bus. "Stay still. Don't breathe." I shouted and pressed my scarf tightly onto my face. The others did the same. We pressed ourselves into the back of the bus. We almost laid on the floor and did not breathe. Paws clattered on the asphalt outside. Come on. I've lost track of time. I heard sirens in the distance. I hoped for rescue. Several police patrols were sent to us. It was difficult for us to explain what really happened. Medics carried out 2 corpses from the scene of the accident. One was our driver, and the other was Handyman Fima's. They stabbed him in the back, pierced his spine in the heart, and the perforating wound was so vast that a fist would fit in it. No monster was found nearby. The bastard escaped in time. My colleagues and I were first taken to the hospital. Then we were interrogated at the local police station. I told only the truth, described everything that I saw and heard. The cops didn't believe me, of course. I didn't care. I just hoped to get back home as soon as possible. I was released around 2 a.m. I slept off, and in the morning I went to the central office with a resignation letter. I asked to be fired without working off. I will never go to that factory outside the city again in my life. I won't even take my stuff from there. All the next week, I did not get out of the hospital. I was checking my lungs. Thank God they were clean. My health was fine. But it was hard for me to get rid of the thought of that I might have inhaled some black mold. Every time I went into the bathroom, I spat into the sink and looked at my saliva for a while to see if there was black pollen on it. So many of my colleagues have died from this. A month later, I accidentally met Michael in the city. We stopped and talked a little. I asked how things are now in the repair department. Michael said that he did not know. He also quit right after that evening. Since then, I've been only thinking about what happened, Michael admitted. Now, I myself have become like Fima. I think about what it was. Some creature near the factory, or we were all poisoned with the same kind of cast, which causes hallucinations. But we couldn't all see the same thing together, could we? And when I found out that the graves have been dug up, I stopped sleeping at night altogether. What graves? I asked. You don't know, Michael said. After all, everyone is talking about it. The graves of our deceased colleagues were recently dug up at the city cemetery. Only the graves of Fima and the driver were not touched. The rest of them have been dug up. The coffins are smashed to pieces, but there are no other bodies. I would have thought that these bodies were exhumed in order to inspect what our guys died from, but people would not work so dirty. Why break the coffins? I think it was that bastard who came after them. It stole the bodies. I changed the subject. I didn't want to talk about it. Michael and I chatted a little more. That thing came for the corpses and took them. That's what I think. Do you think he stole the bodies? No, I don't. I got a good look at that thing at that time. It looked like a dead man on the long outgrowths that protruded from its body. The bastard was throwing out black spores. Now, no one stole the bodies from the cemetery. Most likely, there are just more of these creatures now. I didn't continue the conversation. It hit my psyche too hard, so I quickly said goodbye to him. Farewell, Michael. I think our paths will no longer cross. Thank you, Artem. Take care of yourself too. The end of the first chapter. Prehistory of the second part. Today, I again saw the black mist on the street. After all, I now know what happens to the people when this phenomenon enters the lungs and brings with it death. The city. Yes, the whole world began to gradually sink in the black clouds of this phenomenon. I made a decision for myself to collect all the necessary things and move forward in search of a safe place. Whether it exists, I will have to find out. Subscribe to our Telegram channel. Keep up with the news. Thank you for your attention, group. Babayka by Aniduo. Hello friends, thanks for watching that video, and if you like my voice acting, you can support me by subscribing. Alright, that's it. Bye senpai.